He confessed to a murder he didn't commit. The man walked into the police station at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. He wasn't dragged in. He wasn't handcuffed. He walked through the front door the way someone walks into a hotel lobby, calm, unhurried, almost polite. He approached the front desk, placed both hands flat on the counter, and said 5 words that would ruin several lives. "I killed Margaret Holloway." Officer Reeves, who had been halfway through a cold sandwich, looked up. The man standing before him was mid-30s, clean-shaven, wearing a dark coat over a pressed shirt. No blood, no sweat, no tremor in his voice. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Margaret Holloway, 41 years old, lives at 19 Greenfield Lane. I killed her." Reeves set the sandwich down. He'd been on the force for 14 years, and false confessions weren't exactly rare. Drunks, attention seekers, people in the middle of psychotic breaks. But this man didn't look like any of those. He looked like someone reporting a change of address. "When?" "Tonight." Reeves studied him for a moment. No dilated pupils, no smell of alcohol. Hands steady. The man held eye contact the way people do when they've practiced it. Not aggressive, not evasive, just present. "Have a seat over there," Reeves said, and reached for the phone. A patrol car was dispatched to 19 Greenfield Lane, and while they waited, the man, who identified himself as Daniel Crane, was taken to interview room 2, given a cup of water he didn't drink, and left alone under the fluorescent lights. The camera in the corner recorded everything. For the entire 20 minutes he sat waiting, Daniel Crane did not move. He didn't tap his fingers. He didn't shift in his seat. He didn't look at the mirror or the camera or the door. He sat with his hands folded on the table and his eyes fixed on a point on the wall, like a man meditating, or like a man counting down. 20 minutes later, the patrol car reported back. Margaret Holloway was at home, alive, irritated at being woken up. No signs of forced entry, no signs of anything. That should have been the end of it. Delusional man makes a false confession, gets a psychiatric evaluation, goes home or goes to a hospital. Case closed before it opened. But Sergeant Torres, who had seen enough strange things to trust his instincts, didn't like the way Daniel Crane sat in that chair. Too still, too composed, like a man who had rehearsed this moment 100 times and was finally performing it. Torres pulled up the background check. Daniel Crane, 34, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. Employed as an adjunct professor at Ridgewood Community College, philosophy and ethics. Lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side, paid his rent on time. No history of mental illness, no medications, no flags of any kind. That bothered Torres more than a rap sheet would have. He called Dr. Ellis Morgan. Ellis arrived at 12:30 a.m., coat over her pajama top, coffee in hand. She was a forensic psychiatrist, one of the best in the city, though she'd stopped caring about titles years ago. She consulted on cases when the police needed someone to determine whether a suspect was fit for questioning, or whether they were talking to a wall. She'd done this hundreds of times. The late-night calls, the fluorescent-lit rooms, the people on the other side of the table who were broken, or lying, or both. She had learned long ago to leave herself at the door, to become a mirror, reflecting whatever the subject needed to see in order to keep talking. Torres met her in the hallway. "What do we have?" Man walked in, confessed to murder, victims alive. He's coherent, no signs of substance use, no obvious psychosis, but something's off. "Something's always off at midnight," Ellis said. "What's his name?" "Daniel Crane. No priors, no record. We ran him. He's clean. Teaches at a community college, apparently. Philosophy." Ellis raised an eyebrow. "Philosophy? Yeah, I know. Anything else?" Torres hesitated. "He asked for water when we brought him in. Hasn't touched it." Hasn't asked for a lawyer, hasn't asked to leave, he's just sitting there, like he's waiting for something specific. Or someone specific, Ellis said. She pushed open the door to interview room 2. Daniel Crane looked up. He smiled, not wide, not forced, the kind of smile you give someone you've been expecting. "Dr. Morgan," he said, "thank you for coming." The fact that he knew her name before she introduced herself was the first crack. Small, almost imperceptible. But Ellis noticed it the way a pilot notices a single warning light on a dashboard full of green. She sat down across from him. She placed her coffee on the table, opened her notebook, and clicked her pen. Standard procedure. Make them feel like it's a conversation, not an interrogation. "Mr. Crane, I'm Dr. Ellis Morgan. I'm a forensic psychiatrist. I've been asked to speak with you tonight. Do you understand why you're here?" "Because I told them I killed Margaret Holloway, and they found her alive." "That's right. So let's start there. Why did you say that?" "Because by the time we finish this conversation, it will be true." Ellis paused. Not visibly. She'd trained herself years ago to never show surprise, but somewhere behind her ribs, something shifted. "That sounds like a threat, Daniel." "It's not a threat. It's a fact. There's a difference. You of all people should know that." "What do you mean, me of all people?" Daniel leaned back. He studied her face the way someone studies a painting, not looking for flaws, but admiring the composition. "You're very good at what you do, Dr. Morgan. You've evaluated, what, 300 people? 400? You sit in rooms like this, and you decide who is sane and who isn't, who goes to trial and who goes to a hospital, who is dangerous and who is just broken." He tilted his head. "That's an extraordinary amount of power for one person." "This isn't about me, Daniel." "Of course it is. It's always been about you." Ellis had done this before. Suspects who try to flip the script, turn the interview into a performance, make the evaluator the subject. It was a control tactic. She recognized it. And recognizing it meant it couldn't work. Or so she told herself. "Let's go back to Margaret Holloway," she said. "How do you know her?" "I don't." "Then why did you choose her name?" "I didn't choose her. Someone else did. I'm just the messenger." "The messenger for whom?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked at the one-way mirror to his left, as though he could see through it. Then he looked back at Ellis. "You changed your hair," he said. "It was longer 6 months ago, before the divorce." The pen stopped moving. "Excuse me?" "Your husband, ex-husband rather, James. He moved out in March. You kept the house, but not the dog. That was his condition. He got the dog, you got the silence." Daniel's voice was soft, almost kind. "You handled a silence well, by the way. Most people fill it with noise. You fill it with work." Ellis set the pen down. "How do you know that?" "The same way I know you drink red wine on Thursday nights. 2 glasses. Always 2. Never 1, because 1 feels pointless, and never 3, because 3 feels like a problem. And you're terrified of becoming a problem, Dr. Morgan. You've spent your whole career studying other people's problems so you never have to look at your own." The room was very quiet. On the other side of the mirror, Torres turned to Reeves. "How does he know all that?" Reeves shook his head. "No idea." Torres pulled out his phone. "Get me everything on Daniel Crane, social media, phone records, anything. And pull the CCTV from the block around Dr. Morgan's house for the last 6 months." Ellis had been trained to stay neutral, to observe, not react, to let the subjects talk and reveal themselves. But Daniel Crane wasn't revealing himself. He was revealing her. She could feel the architecture of the conversation, the way he was building something, brick by brick, each piece of personal information placed deliberately, not to shock, but to demonstrate. He wasn't trying to scare her, he was trying to prove a point, that he had done his homework, that nothing about tonight was accidental. "You've been following me," she said. It wasn't a question. Studying you, Daniel corrected. There's a difference. Following implies obsession. Studying implies purpose. And what's your purpose? To sit in this room, with you, tonight. That's been the purpose for 11 months. 11 months? That's how long it took. To learn your patterns, to understand how you think. To know that if a man walked into a police station with a calm confession and a living victim, they would call you. Not Dr. Kapoor. He's on sabbatical, and even when he's here, Torres doesn't trust his instincts. Not Dr. Friedman. She's good, but she only takes daytime calls since her daughter was born. You. Because you're the one they call when things don't make sense, and because you always answer. Ellis felt something she hadn't felt in a professional setting in years, the cold, creeping awareness that she was not in control of this conversation. She had walked into this room believing she was the observer. Now she was beginning to realize she was the experiment. She took a slow breath, picked the pen back up, wrote nothing. Most people who study someone for 11 months have a reason that involves harm, she said. You understand how this looks. I do. But I haven't harmed you. I haven't contacted you. I haven't entered your home or your office. I've simply paid attention. That's not a crime, Dr. Morgan. That's what you do for a living. The irony of that landed harder than she wanted to admit. Let me ask you something, Daniel said, leaning forward slightly. The first time he'd moved toward her. When you evaluate someone, when you sit in this chair and you ask your questions and you make your notes, do you ever think about what happens after? After what? After you sign the report, after you deliver your professional opinion, after the judge reads your words and makes a decision based on them. Do you ever follow up? You ever check? That's not my role. I know it's not your role. I'm asking if you do it anyway. Ellis didn't answer. You don't, Daniel said. I know you don't, because I checked. You write the report, you cash the check, and you move on to the next one. 412 evaluations, Dr. Morgan. 412 times you've held someone's future in your hands, and not once, not a single time, have you gone back to see whether you were right. The system has follow-up mechanisms. The system, Daniel almost laughed. Not cruelly, sadly. The system is a word people use when they don't want to say, I. The system didn't evaluate Adrian Lockwood. You did. What do you want, Daniel? I want you to remember a name. What name? Adrian Lockwood. The name landed like a stone in still water. Ellis didn't flinch, but she didn't need to. Daniel saw it in her eyes. Recognition. And then, immediately after, the thing that always follows recognition. Denial. I've evaluated hundreds of people. 412, Daniel said. Adrian Lockwood was number 209, 3 years ago. He was brought in after he attacked a woman named Catherine Crane in a parking garage, beat her so badly she spent 4 months in the hospital, lost hearing in her left ear, permanent nerve damage in her right hand, 7 surgeries. The last one was 2 months ago. They tried to repair the tendon in her index finger. It didn't work. Daniel paused. His composure didn't crack, but something behind it shifted, like a wall that's still standing, but no longer load-bearing. Catherine Crane. My sister. Ellis opened her mouth, then closed it. She was 31 when it happened, Daniel continued. She taught music at Westbrook Elementary. 3rd graders. She had this thing she did at the start of every class. She'd play a little Chopin, just 30 seconds, and the kids would have to guess which emotion the music was trying to express. Happy, sad, angry, scared. She said it taught them to listen with their hearts, not just their ears. He looked down at his hands. She tried to go back to teaching after she got out of the hospital. She made it through 1 class. She sat down at the piano, put her hands on the keys, and her right hand started shaking so badly she knocked over the music stand. 23 8-year-olds watched their teacher cry because she couldn't play a C major chord. The silence in the room had weight. She hasn't been back since. She works at a call center now, data entry mostly, because the headset hurts her left ear if she wears it too long. She makes $19 an hour. She used to make children fall in love with music. Ellis's throat was tight. She recognized the technique. She used it herself in therapy when she needed a patient to feel something they were resisting. Build the picture. Make it human. Make it impossible to look away. But this wasn't a technique. This was a brother talking about his sister, and she could hear the difference. Adrian Lockwood was psychotic at the time of the attack, she said carefully. He was diagnosed with, I know the diagnosis. I've memorized every word of your report. You concluded that he was not criminally responsible due to his mental state. You recommended treatment at Ashworth Psychiatric Facility. And 18 months later, your colleagues, following your framework, your methodology, your professional opinion, determined he was stable enough to be released. That wasn't my decision. I provided the initial evaluation. The release was built on your foundation, your words, your authority. You said he wasn't responsible, and because you said it, he was treated instead of convicted. And because he was treated instead of convicted, he was released. And because he was released. Daniel stopped. The silence was worse than any sentence he could have finished with. Daniel, Ellis said quietly, what happened after he was released? Daniel looked at her for a long time. Do you know what it's like to watch someone you love rebuild their life, piece by piece, knowing that the person who destroyed it is out there, free, walking the same streets? Catherine didn't leave the house for 3 months after she found out he was released. She slept with a knife under her pillow. She installed 4 locks on her front door. She stopped going to the grocery store because she was afraid she'd see him in the cereal aisle. He leaned back. And I watched. I watched my sister, the bravest, kindest person I've ever known, become a prisoner in her own home. Because a man in a white coat took pills for 18 months and someone with a clipboard said he was better. Daniel, ask about Margaret Holloway. On the other side of the mirror, Torres was on the phone. He'd pulled Daniel Crane's phone records, and what he found made his stomach drop. No calls to Adrian Lockwood, no texts, no emails, no connection of any kind between the two men, not on social media, not through mutual contacts, not through any digital footprint Torres could find. Whatever Daniel Crane had built, he'd built it without leaving a trace. But Torres found something else. 8 months ago, Daniel had called the precinct's non-emergency line. The call lasted 11 minutes. Torres pulled the log. Daniel had spoken to Detective Walsh and reported that Adrian Lockwood, recently released from psychiatric care, had been seen following women in the Greenfield neighborhood, walking behind them, sitting in his car outside their houses, never touching anyone, never speaking, just watching. Walsh had noted the call, filed it, done nothing. Torres set the phone down and looked through the mirror at Daniel Crane, sitting perfectly still in his chair, and felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years on the force. The uneasy suspicion that he was looking at a man who might be the smartest person he'd ever encountered. At 1:14 a.m., Sergeant Torres's phone rang. He listened for 12 seconds, then put the phone down very slowly, as if it might break. He walked to the intercom. "Dr. Morgan, step outside, please." Ellis stood. Daniel didn't move. He sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, eyes on the wall ahead. He looked like a man who had just finished a long run and was finally catching his breath. In the hallway, Torres's face told her everything before his mouth did. "Margaret Holloway is dead. Neighbor heard screaming, called it in. Officers found her in the kitchen. Blunt force trauma. Time of death looks like approximately 1 a.m. Ellis felt the floor tilt. She put a hand on the wall. He's been here since before midnight. He's been in this room the entire time. I know. Then he didn't do it. I know that too. They stood there, two professionals confronting a problem that didn't fit inside any protocol. A man confesses to a murder before it happens, sits in custody while it's carried out, and waits patiently to be told the news. He has a partner, Torres said. He must have coordinated. No, Ellis shook her head. I've been sitting with him for almost an hour. This isn't a partnership. He didn't send anyone. He didn't arrange anything. Then how did he know? Ellis looked at the door to interview room 2. Through it, she could feel Daniel's presence. Patient, still, waiting. Because he knew what Adrian Lockwood was going to do, she said quietly. He didn't have to plan it. He just had to predict it. Torres stared at her. You're telling me he predicted a murder? I'm telling you he understood the murderer better than anyone in this building. Better than the doctors who treated him. Better than... She stopped. Better than you, Torres finished. Ellis didn't answer. She pushed the door open and went back in. She sat down. Daniel was waiting, the same half smile on his face. But now it looked different. Not smug, not triumphant. It looked tired. Margaret Holloway is dead, Ellis said. Yes. You knew she was going to die? Yes. How? Because I watched him. For months. After he was released, I watched Adrian Lockwood the way I watched you. Carefully. Patiently. Without contact. I saw him walk through the Greenfield neighborhood. I saw him slow down in front of certain houses. I saw which women caught his attention. Always the same type. Dark hair, mid-30s to early 40s, living alone. Like Catherine. He was shopping, Dr. Morgan. He was walking through a catalogue of future victims, and nobody was paying attention. Nobody except me. You watched him stalk women and you didn't call the police? I did call the police. 8 months ago. I told Detective Walsh exactly what I saw. He told me that walking down a street isn't a crime. Sitting in a parked car isn't a crime. Looking at someone isn't a crime. He was right, technically. The way you were right, technically, when you said Adrian Lockwood wasn't responsible. Ellis closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, Daniel was watching her with an expression she couldn't categorize. Not anger, not satisfaction. Something closer to grief. You set this up, Ellis said. All of it. You've spent 11 months engineering this moment. The confession, the living victim, getting me into this room. And while I sat here listening to you, Adrian Lockwood, the man I evaluated, the man who was released because of my assessment, killed someone. And you wanted me here, in this chair, so I would know, so I would feel it. Daniel didn't deny it. He didn't gloat. He just nodded, slowly. My sister can't play the piano anymore, he said. She was a music teacher. She loved Chopin. She'll never play Chopin again because her right hand shakes so badly she can't hold a cup of coffee. And the man who did that to her was walking free. Because of you. Because of the system, Daniel. I followed the protocols, and the protocols failed. You are the protocol, Dr. Morgan. When you sit in this chair and you sign your name on a report, you become the system. You don't get to hide behind it. Ellis said nothing. I didn't kill Margaret Holloway, Daniel said. I didn't ask Adrian to kill her. I didn't even know her. I never spoke to Adrian, never contacted him, never so much as stood in the same room with him. But I knew what he was. I knew he hadn't changed. I knew the pills and the therapy and the 18 months of supervised care hadn't fixed whatever was broken inside him. I knew he was escalating. And I knew that no one would listen to the brother of a victim. So I built something you couldn't ignore. You could have warned us. You could have come here and told them Margaret Holloway was in danger. And said what? That I had a feeling? that I'd been watching a released psychiatric patient follow women and I thought he might attack one of them. You know what would have happened? They would have sent a car to check on her, the same way they sent a car tonight. And she would have been alive and irritated, and they would have filed a report and forgotten about it. And 3 days later, or 3 weeks later, Adrian would have done it anyway. Because that's what he does. That's what he is. And you told the world he wasn't. A woman is dead, Daniel. Daniel leaned forward. For the first time, his voice dropped below a conversational register, not to a whisper, to something heavier, something that had been carried for a long time. Yes, and I will live with that. I will carry Margaret Holloway's name for the rest of my life. But I want you to carry it too. I want you to know what your signature looks like when it's written in someone else's blood. Because the next time you sit in a room like this and you pick up your pen and you write, "Not criminally responsible," I want you to remember tonight. I want you to remember that you were wrong. And I want you to be afraid of being wrong again. The clock on the wall ticked. The fluorescent light buzzed. Neither of them spoke for a long time. "You could have saved her," Alice said. Her voice was barely audible. "So could you," Daniel replied. 3 years ago. At 2:30 a.m., Adrian Lockwood was arrested 4 blocks from Margaret Holloway's home. He was walking calmly down the center of the street, still carrying the kitchen knife. His shirt was stained dark. His eyes were empty. Not wild, not panicked. Empty. Like windows in a house where no one lives. When officers approached him, he didn't run. He didn't resist. He held out his wrists for the handcuffs as if he'd been expecting them, and said only one thing. She looked like the other one. The arresting officer, a rookie named Daniels, would later tell Torres that it was the calmest arrest he'd ever made. Lockwood walked to the patrol car, ducked his head to get in, and sat quietly for the entire ride to the station. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't ask where he was going. He sat with his hands cuffed in his lap and stared out the window at the passing streetlights like a man on a long commute. At the station, Lockwood was processed and placed in a holding cell on the opposite side of the building from Daniel Crane. The 2 men were never in the same hallway, never in the same room, never within earshot of each other. When detectives searched for any connection between them, phone records, emails, social media, financial transactions, shared acquaintances, they found nothing. Not a single thread linking Daniel Crane to Adrian Lockwood. Except one. Catherine Crane's medical file, which listed Adrian Lockwood as her attacker, and Dr. Ellis Morgan as the evaluating psychiatrist. Daniel Crane was held for 72 hours. His lawyer, a public defender named Marsh, who looked like she hadn't slept in days, argued that he had committed no crime. He had confessed to a murder that, at the time of his confession, hadn't occurred. He had no contact with Adrian Lockwood. No evidence linked him to the killing. He had walked into a police station and talked. The DA's office spent 2 days trying to build a case: conspiracy, aiding and abetting, failure to report, obstruction. They turned the evidence over and over like a Rubik's Cube, looking for the combination that would hold up in court. They couldn't find it. Daniel Crane had done something extraordinary. He had engineered a situation in which a woman died, positioned himself at the center of the aftermath, and left no legal fingerprint on any of it. He hadn't pulled a trigger. He hadn't hired anyone. He hadn't even made a phone call. He had simply understood a dangerous man better than the professionals who were paid to understand him, and he had used that understanding to build a stage. The DA couldn't charge him. Not with murder, not with conspiracy, not with anything that would hold up. He was released on a Friday afternoon. He walked out of the station into pale autumn sunlight, put on his coat, and disappeared into the city like a stone dropped into deep water. Torres found Ellis in her office that evening. She was sitting behind her desk, but she wasn't working. The desk was clean, no files, no notebook, no coffee. Just her hands, flat on the surface, the way Daniel had placed his on the police station counter 3 nights earlier. "You okay?" Torres asked, though he already knew the answer. I pulled my file on Adrian Lockwood, she said. My original evaluation. I read it 3 times today. And? And it's thorough. It's well-reasoned. Every conclusion follows from the data. It's exactly the kind of evaluation I was trained to write. But? Ellis looked up at him. Her eyes were steady, but something behind them had shifted. The way a building looks the same from the outside after an earthquake, but the foundation has cracked. But there's a paragraph on page 4 where I describe his affect during the interview. I wrote that he displayed appropriate emotional responses and genuine remorse for his actions. I remember the interview. I remember thinking he seemed sincere, that he understood what he'd done, that the psychosis was the cause, not the character. She paused. And I'm sitting here now, wondering whether he was sincere, or whether he was simply smart enough to show me what I needed to see. And the honest answer is, I don't know. I didn't know then, and I don't know now, and I signed the report anyway. Torres didn't have anything to say to that. He stood in the doorway for a moment, then left. 3 weeks later, Ellis drove to a small apartment complex on the east side of the city. She sat in her car for 10 minutes before going inside. She almost didn't. The door was opened by a woman with dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She was thin. Not fashionably thin, but the kind of thin that comes from forgetting to eat. Her right hand rested against the doorframe, and Ellis could see the tremor even from 2 feet away. A faint, constant vibration, like a plucked string that never stops ringing. Catherine Crane? Yes? My name is Dr. Ellis Morgan. I was the psychiatrist who evaluated the man who hurt you. Catherine's face didn't change. She looked at Ellis for a long time, long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable, then long enough for it to become something else, something quieter. I know who you are, Catherine said. I wanted to... Ellis stopped. She had rehearsed this on the drive over. She had prepared words, careful, professional, appropriate words. But standing here, looking at this woman's trembling hand, none of them seemed like enough. I wanted to tell you I'm sorry, she said. Catherine studied her. Then she stepped aside and held the door open. You should come in, she said. I'll make tea. It takes me a while. The kettle is heavy. Ellis stepped inside. The apartment was small and very clean. There was a piano in the corner of the living room, an old upright, the kind you find in elementary school music rooms. The lid was closed. A thin layer of dust covered the keys. Catherine saw her looking at it. I keep it, she said. Daniel tells me I should sell it, but I keep it. Why? Catherine smiled, a small, fragile thing. Because the day I sell it is the day I admit he took it from me forever. And I'm not ready to admit that yet. They sat at the kitchen table and drank tea, and Ellis listened to Catherine Crane talk about music and third graders and Chopin and the sound a hand makes when it can no longer do the one thing it was meant to do. She didn't take notes. She didn't evaluate. She just listened. It was the first time in her career she had gone back. Ellis Morgan sat in her car in the parking lot afterward for a long time. She didn't start the engine. She didn't check her phone. She thought about 412 evaluations. 412 reports signed with her name. 412 people whose futures she had shaped with a pen and a professional opinion. She thought about Catherine Crane's hand, trembling too badly to play Chopin. She thought about Margaret Holloway, dead on her kitchen floor. She thought about Adrian Lockwood saying she looked like the other one. And she thought about Daniel Crane, a man who had broken no laws, harmed no one, and destroyed her completely. Not with violence, not with threats, with a question she would never be able to answer. If you had the power to decide who was dangerous, and you were wrong, Whose fault is the next body? Ellis started the car. She drove home. She poured 1 glass of red wine, not 2, and sat in the kitchen until the sun came up. She never answered the question, but she never stopped hearing it.